The day had
Thank you
finally
all for
come.
being here
The
today.
grand hall was
It means
buzzing
the
with
world to
excitement.
us.
White flowers decorated the entrance. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and the soft sound of music floated through the air. Guests were arriving, dressed in their finest, chatting excitedly about the wedding of the year. But behind all the glitter and smiles, a storm was quietly brewing. Madison, the bride, stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her veil. She looked stunning, flawless in a white gown that hugged her figure perfectly. But her eyes were cold, calculating. No one knew what she was planning, not even her fiancé, Derek. Only she knew the truth, a secret plan that would shock everyone, especially one person. Derek, her fiancé, paced nervously in the next room. He had proposed to Madison months ago, believing she was the perfect partner. But lately, he had noticed something strange in her behavior. She was distant, sometimes lost in thought, and had this unusual obsession with control. Still, he trusted her. He had no idea what was coming. Madison took a deep breath and smiled to herself. Her plan was cruel, yes, but she thought it was brilliant. She had discovered that Derek's ex-girlfriend, Bianca, was pregnant. Bianca had once been the center of Derek's life, and Madison had always felt threatened by her. Now, she saw an opportunity. She had sent Bianca an invitation to perform at the wedding. A special performance, she called it. Bianca, kind-hearted and polite, accepted without suspicion. She had no idea that the invitation was not a gesture of friendship, but a trap, a stage set for humiliation. Madison imagined the scene in her head. Bianca would stand there on the grand stage, singing in front of everyone, including Derek. Madison would watch, smirking, as Bianca realized she had walked straight into her plan. She could almost hear the whispers of the guests, the shocked expressions, the tension in the air. The thought made her heart race with excitement. She moved closer to the window, looking outside. The sun was shining. The day was perfect, and yet a dark thrill ran through her. No one would suspect that beneath her calm, smiling exterior, she was plotting something so cruel. She whispered to herself, "This will be unforgettable." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Bianca was unaware of the storm ahead. She was preparing for the performance, humming softly as she practiced her song. Her voice was beautiful, pure, filled with emotion. She was pregnant but determined to stay strong. She wanted to bring joy to the wedding, not conflict. Back in the bridal suite, Madison's assistant brought in the final touches, flowers, jewelry, and a small note that Madison had written. She read it and laughed quietly. It was meant to guide Bianca to the stage, to ensure that the X would be in the exact spot Madison wanted. Every detail was perfect. Every step had been planned. Derek entered the room, looking concerned. "Madison, are you ready? The guests are arriving. And, have you thought about Bianca performing? Are you sure this is a good idea?" His voice was hesitant. Madison turned to him, smiling sweetly. "Of course, Derek. Everything will be perfect. You'll see." But inside, she was already imagining the faces of the guests when Bianca started singing. She could see their surprise, their admiration for Bianca, and her own twisted satisfaction. As the minutes passed, Madison rehearsed her facial expressions in the mirror. She wanted to look calm, happy, innocent. No one could suspect the dark thrill she felt. She thought about the moment Bianca would reach the stage, how Derek would react, how the crowd would watch. This was her moment, and she intended to savor it. The clock ticked closer to the ceremony. The guests began to take their seats. Flowers were arranged perfectly. Music floated through the air, and Madison stood at the window, eyes fixed on the entrance. She felt a shiver of excitement. Soon, everything would unfold. Her plan, her revenge, her perfect moment of control. It was all about to begin. And somewhere across town, Bianca hummed her song softly, unaware that her performance would become the most unforgettable and shocking moment of the day. Madison took a final deep breath, smoothing her gown. A smile curved her lips, not the happy smile of a bride, but the triumphant smile of someone who knew she held power over the moment. The wedding would be perfect, or so she thought. And with that, the stage was set, the guests were ready, and the first act of her shocking plan was about to begin. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the grand hall, casting golden light across the white marble floor. Guests were arriving early, excited whispers echoing through the corridors. Madison, the bride, was already dressed in her stunning gown, her reflection sparkling in the mirror. But her mind was far from the flowers and decorations. Her thoughts were only on one thing: Bianca. Bianca, Derek's ex, had accepted this special invitation without hesitation. Madison had worded it carefully, making it sound like a gesture of friendship, a performance to honor the couple. Bianca, kind and polite, had never imagined that the invitation was a trap. She was pregnant, nervous, and yet determined to do her best. She wanted to bring beauty and joy to the wedding, not drama. Madison's assistant knocked lightly on the door. "Everything is ready, Miss Madison. The guests are arriving, and Bianca is here for her performance." Madison's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. She walked to the window, watching the valet park cars. Every detail was perfect. Every step of her plan had been carefully calculated. She imagined Bianca's face when she realized the true reason she had been invited. The thought made Madison's heart race. This was not just a wedding. It was a stage for her revenge. Meanwhile, Bianca arrived, carefully stepping out of her car. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her baby bump noticeable but graceful. She carried herself with dignity, her eyes scanning the beautiful decorations with awe. She had always loved music and was excited to share her voice. Yet, deep down, a small, uneasy feeling tugged at her. Something felt off. She shrugged it away, blaming wedding nerves. Inside the hall, Madison greeted her with a bright, polite smile. "Bianca, I'm so glad you're here. We're all excited for your performance. It will be unforgettable." Bianca smiled back, unaware of the underlying tension. "Thank you, Madison. I just want to contribute something special to the day." Her voice was calm, soft, and sincere. Madison led her to a small dressing area backstage. "I've arranged everything for you," she said smoothly. "Here's your spot on stage. You'll sing right after the ceremony. Just follow the instructions, and it will be perfect." Bianca nodded, trusting Madison completely. She had no reason to suspect the bride's true intentions. But Madison watched her closely, a shadow of cruel delight crossing her face. She imagined the crowd's reaction when Bianca's voice filled the room. She imagined Derek's surprise, maybe even discomfort. And most of all, she imagined the ex's shock, knowing she had walked straight into Madison's trap. Outside, the guests began to settle into their seats. The hall smelled of fresh flowers and polished wood. Music played softly, creating a calm, romantic atmosphere. But backstage, tension was thick. Madison's excitement contrasted sharply with Bianca's quiet nervousness. "Are you ready?" Madison asked, her voice sweet, almost innocent. Bianca nodded. "I think so. I just want to do my best." Madison gave a small, approving nod. "Of course. Just remember, the spotlight will be on you. Everyone will be watching." Bianca smiled nervously, clutching the sheet music in her hands. She had no idea how the eyes of the entire wedding party were soon going to scrutinize her, how every word she sang could be twisted by Madison's cruel intentions. Back in the bridal suite, Madison took a final look in the mirror. She adjusted her veil, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. This was it. The plan was unfolding exactly as she had imagined. Soon, the ceremony would end, and Bianca would take the stage. Madison could almost hear the gasps of surprise, the whispers, the shock she longed to see. Derek wandered backstage, frowning slightly. "Madison, are you sure this is a good idea?" "Bianca, she's pregnant. This could be awkward." Madison turned to him, her smile calm and confident. "Derek, everything will be fine. Just trust me. It's all part of the day." Derek hesitated, sensing something in her tone he didn't understand. But he had no idea just how elaborate Madison's plan was. He thought it was a harmless, perhaps even kind gesture. He couldn't have been more wrong. As the ceremony began, Bianca quietly waited backstage. She could hear the soft murmur of guests and the distant organ music. Her heart beat faster with nervous excitement. She had no idea that she was about to face a moment she would never forget, a performance that would test her strength, dignity, and courage. Madison, standing near the entrance, took a deep breath. She looked around at the beautifully arranged hall, the happy faces, the sparkling decorations. And then her eyes fell on Bianca. The bride's lips curved into a triumphant smile. Everything was ready. The stage was set. The trap was waiting. And somewhere deep inside, Bianca felt a small flicker of unease. A tiny warning that maybe, just maybe, this was not going to be an ordinary wedding performance. The audience didn't know it yet, but the moment Bianca would step on stage would change everything. Backstage, the air was thick with tension. Bianca sat quietly in a small, dimly lit room. Her sheet music clutched tightly in her hands. Her baby bump made her movements slow, but her posture was strong, proud. She had always believed in carrying herself with dignity, no matter the situation. Today, though, something felt different. The soft hum of the organ from the main hall drifted through the walls, a gentle reminder that soon, all eyes would be on her. Madison, the bride, hovered nearby, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She smiled at Bianca, sweet and polite on the surface, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. Every movement Bianca made, every small breath, Madison noted. This was the moment she had waited for, a moment to finally assert control, to humiliate the woman who had once held a piece of her fiancé's heart. "You look beautiful," Madison said, her voice silky. "Just remember to smile. Everyone loves a smile." Bianca nodded politely. "Thank you, Madison. I'll do my best." She had no idea that Madison's compliment was a weapon, a way to heighten her nerves before the performance. Madison stepped closer, pretending to adjust Bianca's hair. Her fingers lingered just long enough to send a tiny shiver of discomfort down Bianca's spine. "Remember," she whispered, "the crowd will be watching you. Every note, every gesture. Make it memorable." Bianca took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She had performed in front of hundreds before, but this was different. This was personal. She didn't understand why Madison had invited her. She thought it was a gesture of goodwill. But the way Madison looked at her, the subtle tension in her voice, hinted that something more sinister was at play. Meanwhile, Madison's mind raced. She pictured the scene. Bianca standing there, nervous, singing in front of everyone, Derek watching from the front row, unsure what to do. The crowd would gasp at Bianca's presence, her pregnancy, and perhaps even pity her. Madison could almost hear the whispers already, exactly what she wanted. Humiliation served on a silver platter. But Bianca, unaware of the trap, was focused on her music. Her voice was soft as she hummed, practicing the first few lines quietly. Each note carried emotion, a mixture of hope and pain, a reflection of her life's recent struggles. Even in this tense moment, she managed to exude strength. Madison's assistant knocked lightly on the door. 10 minutes until the ceremony ends, she said. Bianca will be on stage soon. Madison's lips curved into a thin, triumphant smile. She looked at Bianca, who was now standing, adjusting her sheet music. Every instinct told her to control the moment completely, to ensure Bianca's discomfort was as public as possible. Bianca took another deep breath. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the crowd, imagining herself standing strong despite any awkwardness. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet confidence. She may have been pregnant, she may have been vulnerable in some ways, but her voice, her presence, was her strength. Madison noticed the calm in Bianca's eyes and felt a flash of annoyance. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had expected fear, trembling, hesitation. But Bianca, she looked ready. She looked determined. Madison's mind raced. How could she control this woman who seemed so composed in her trap? The soft murmur of guests settling into their seats drifted in from the main hall. Madison glanced toward the stage, her stomach tightening with anticipation. Soon, the doors would open. Soon, everyone would witness her carefully laid plan in action. She imagined Derek's surprise, the shock of the guests, and her own satisfaction. Everything depended on this moment, and she felt the rush of adrenaline. Bianca, still unaware of Madison's intentions, moved toward the small entrance that led to the stage. She adjusted her sheet music, feeling the weight of expectation. This was not just a performance. It was a challenge, though she did not yet know whose challenge it truly was. Madison followed a step behind, maintaining a friendly smile, her mind buzzing with excitement and control. She whispered, "Just follow the instructions. Everything will be perfect." But behind the words was a hidden meaning, a trap waiting to spring. Bianca paused for a moment, glancing back at Madison with a polite, uncertain smile. There was no malice in her eyes, only the hope of delivering a beautiful performance. Madison's smile faltered slightly as she realized Bianca might not react as expected. She might succeed, and if she did, Madison's plan, so meticulously crafted, could unravel completely. The doors to the hall opened slightly, and the organ music swelled. The guests were applauding, unaware of the tension backstage, unaware of the silent battle brewing just behind the curtains. Madison's pulse quickened. Everything was about to unfold. The moment of humiliation, or the moment of unexpected triumph, was almost here. Bianca stepped forward, her small frame carrying quiet confidence. Madison followed, her smile ready, her mind racing. And somewhere deep inside, both women felt the electric tension of what was about to happen. The stage was set. The performance, the confrontation, and the shock that awaited were only moments away. The organ music faded, leaving a quiet murmur of guests settling into their seats. The grand hall, decorated with white roses and golden lights, held a collective breath. Every eye seemed to turn toward the small side door where Bianca stood, sheet music in hand, her heart pounding like a drum. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Today, she was about to face something she could never have predicted. Madison stood nearby, her posture perfect, her smile sweet and calm, hiding the storm of anticipation inside. She imagined the crowd's reaction, shock, whispers, maybe even pity. She expected Bianca to hesitate, falter, or freeze under the pressure. This was her moment, her carefully orchestrated humiliation. Bianca stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. She could feel the warmth of the hall, the expectant eyes of the guests, the soft hum of the organ tuning behind her. And then, with a quiet confidence she didn't fully realize she had, she lifted her voice. The first note filled the room, soft but clear. It was not weak or trembling. It was steady, gentle, yet commanding, reaching every corner of the hall. Heads turned, whispers paused. The guests, expecting something ordinary, were caught off guard by the beauty and emotion of her voice. Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't supposed to happen. Bianca's voice, strong, emotional, moving, was capturing the attention she wanted for herself. The bride had planned this as a moment of control, a scene of humiliation, but instead, Bianca was commanding the room with grace and dignity. As Bianca sang, memories and emotions poured into her voice. She sang not only for the wedding, but for herself, for her unborn child, for every moment she had been doubted or underestimated. Each note carried pain, hope, and quiet strength. The audience felt it instantly. They leaned forward, listening, mesmerized. Derek watched from the front row, his hands tightening in his lap. He had come expecting a simple performance, a pleasant background for the ceremony. But now his ex-girlfriend, pregnant, vulnerable, yet radiantly strong, was singing with a presence that stunned everyone, even him. Madison's plan was unraveling before his eyes. Madison forced herself to smile, but inside, a panic was growing. Her careful plan, every manipulative detail, was crumbling under Bianca's sheer strength. She had imagined whispers of pity, awkward glances, maybe even embarrassment. Instead, the whispers were admiring. The glances were full of awe. Guests were nodding, some even quietly wiping tears from their eyes. Bianca was shining. Midway through her song, Bianca's voice soared. She had chosen a piece that spoke of resilience, strength, and moving forward despite hardship. The lyrics, though general, seemed pointed. Madison felt a jolt. Every word felt like it was directed at her, highlighting her cruelty without naming her. The bride's carefully planned humiliation was turning against her, right in front of the crowd. The audience was now fully captivated. Phones were discreetly raised, capturing every note, every emotion. Bianca's pregnant figure, standing tall on the stage, became a symbol of courage. She was not just singing. She was reclaiming her dignity, demonstrating that no scheme, no humiliation could diminish her. Madison's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet. She had never imagined that this plan could fail so spectacularly. Her mind raced. What should she do? Interrupt? Leave? But each option seemed more humiliating than the last. She had set the stage for triumph, and instead, Bianca was stealing it effortlessly. Derek finally rose, unable to sit still. His face showed a mix of guilt, admiration, and confusion. He realized, painfully, that his bride's plan was cruel, but Bianca's strength and grace were undeniable. For the first time that day, he wondered if Madison had misjudged everything. Bianca's song reached its climax. Her voice filled the hall, rich and emotional, touching every listener. She closed her eyes, letting the music carry her, letting her emotions flow freely. The crowd was silent for a moment, spellbound, before erupting into heartfelt applause. Every hand clapped, some feet stomped, some whispered words of admiration. Bianca had transformed the moment completely, turning what was meant to humiliate her into a powerful statement of strength. Madison's face flushed. She had expected attention, but not this. Not admiration. She felt a mix of anger, jealousy, and disbelief. Her plan had failed spectacularly, and everyone had witnessed it. Bianca took a small bow, acknowledging the applause with grace. Her eyes, shining with pride and quiet triumph, met Derek's for a brief moment. The message was clear. She had emerged stronger, more radiant, and unbroken. The bride, Madison, realized then that some plans, no matter how carefully plotted, could never control true strength and dignity. The performance had not only moved the crowd, but it also revealed the stark difference between cruelty and resilience. As Bianca stepped off the stage, the applause still echoing, Madison's mind spun. She had wanted humiliation, but instead, she had witnessed inspiration. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning of the consequences she had set in motion. The first act of the wedding was complete, but the tension, the shock, and the emotional battle had only just begun. The applause for Bianca's performance echoed through the grand hall like a wave, washing over every guest. Some clapped softly, some whistled, and others simply sat stunned, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. What was meant to be a moment of embarrassment for Bianca had transformed into a celebration of her strength. And Madison, standing near the entrance, could feel the walls of her carefully constructed plan crumbling around her. Her smile, once confident, faltered. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet. She had imagined shocked faces, awkward glances, maybe pity. Instead, there were nods of admiration, whispers of awe, and the unmistakable sparkle of respect in everyone's eyes. The bride's stomach churned with disbelief. Bianca, the pregnant ex, had taken the stage and turned it into a platform of power, not humiliation. Derek sat frozen in his seat, torn between emotions. Guilt, admiration, and confusion battled for dominance in his chest. He had assumed the invitation was harmless, perhaps even thoughtful, but Madison's intentions were clear. Yet now, he couldn't help but feel a quiet admiration for Bianca. She had faced what could have been an impossible, humiliating situation and emerged victorious. Backstage, Bianca wiped a small bead of sweat from her forehead. Her voice had carried her story, her strength, her pain, and her dignity. She hadn't intended to humiliate anyone, but somehow, her song had sent a message that was impossible to ignore. The subtle power in her lyrics, the calm confidence in her delivery, had flipped Madison's cruel plan completely. Madison, meanwhile, tried to regain control. She whispered to herself, "It's just a song. It's just a song. No one will remember this for long." But deep down, she knew that the moment had left a mark, not just on the audience, but on Derek, and perhaps even on herself. She had underestimated the power of Bianca's presence, her resilience, and the respect she commanded effortlessly. As the applause died down, Bianca continued her song, improvising a soft verse that seemed to address resilience and moving forward. The words were not directed at Madison explicitly, but the meaning was clear. Guests could sense it, and even Madison felt it in her chest. Each lyric spoke of dignity, of rising above cruelty, and of embracing one's own strength. Whispers ran through the hall. "She's incredible. I've never heard a voice like that. And she's pregnant, wow." Madison's plan, intended to humiliate, was backfiring spectacularly. Every note Bianca sang made the bride's intentions appear petty and cruel. Guests began exchanging glances, some shaking their heads subtly, while others leaned in closer to witness Bianca's commanding performance. Madison's mind raced. She had one option: to interrupt, to regain control, but the thought terrified her. If she acted, she would only draw attention to herself, highlighting her failed attempt. The power had shifted completely. Bianca, unintended yet unstoppable, was now the center of admiration. Derek finally rose, his hands clenching. He could no longer sit still, feeling a mix of pride for Bianca and guilt for Madison's intentions. He realized that her song had done more than entertain. It had revealed character, resilience, and a quiet, unshakable strength. He had assumed Madison would handle the situation perfectly, but her reaction had shown him otherwise. Meanwhile, Bianca's song reached its emotional peak. Her voice carried not just melody, but the weight of every challenge she had faced, the judgment, the heartbreak, the uncertainty. The audience was moved, some teary-eyed, some whispering quietly to each other, and all captivated by the pregnant woman who had taken the stage with courage and dignity. Madison felt a burning flush rise to her face. She had planned humiliation, but she had unintentionally created a moment of triumph for Bianca. The crowd was on her side, and the bride's smug satisfaction had evaporated into panic. She tried to smile, but it looked forced, tense, and hollow. Every eye in the hall was now subtly aware of her intentions and the failure of her plan. Bianca's song ended softly, her final note lingering in the air like a promise. The audience erupted into applause, louder this time, heartfelt and genuine. Some guests rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with admiration. Bianca gave a modest bow, her eyes shining with pride, her presence radiating a quiet power that Madison had underestimated entirely. The unexpected turn had changed everything. Madison's plan had backfired spectacularly, revealing her own cruelty rather than Bianca's vulnerability. The bride realized that true strength could not be manipulated, and dignity could not be humiliated. Meanwhile, Derek looked at both women, conflicted, and slowly understanding that respect, courage, and honesty held more power than any scheme. As Bianca stepped off the stage, applause still echoing around her, Madison could feel the sting of defeat. This was not the humiliation she had intended. This was a triumph, a lesson, and a moment of revelation for everyone present. And somewhere in the back of Madison's mind, the thought crept in: she had underestimated Bianca, and she would pay for it. The hall buzzed with applause and whispers as Bianca stepped off the stage, her voice still echoing softly in the corners of the grand room. The pregnant singer's calm demeanor had captivated everyone, from the guests to Derek, who now looked conflicted and uneasy. Madison, however, was seething. Every fiber of her carefully planned humiliation had backfired spectacularly, and the bitter taste of failure filled her mouth. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet, trying to maintain composure. She had expected whispers of pity, awkward glances, maybe even a few stifled chuckles. Instead, there were nods of admiration, whispers of awe, and a subtle sense of respect surrounding Bianca. The bride had imagined herself in control, but now the power had shifted. The crowd was clearly on Bianca's side. Madison's mind raced, her thoughts snapping like lightning. How could this happen? She thought. She was supposed to be humiliated, not celebrated. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to reclaim control, to interrupt, to assert herself. But she also knew that doing so would only draw more attention to her own failed plan. Derek, standing in the front row, finally spoke, his voice low but tense. "Madison, maybe we should just let it be." She sang beautifully. No one's trying to cause trouble. His words were calm, but his eyes betrayed guilt and conflict. He realized the plan was cruel, and he couldn't condone it. But more importantly, he couldn't deny the truth. Bianca had risen above the scheme, and she had done it with grace. Madison forced a tight-lipped smile, masking the storm inside her. "Of course, Derek," she said sweetly, though the edge in her voice was unmistakable. She turned slightly, hoping to hide the storm of emotions building in her chest. "I'll show her. I'll make sure this doesn't end here," she thought. Meanwhile, Bianca, standing nearby, had not yet realized the full extent of Madison's fury. Her focus was on staying composed, maintaining her dignity, and keeping her voice steady in case she was asked to perform again or address the audience further. She had faced humiliation before, in subtle forms, but nothing like this. And yet, the respect she had earned from the crowd gave her a quiet strength that even Madison couldn't ignore. Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Bianca could hear. "You think you've won," she said, her tone a mixture of sweetness and venom. "But don't forget, this is my wedding, and I decide what happens here." Bianca met her eyes calmly, her expression serene yet firm. "I came to sing, Madison, not to compete or fight, but I will not let fear or anger control me." Her voice was soft, but the confidence behind it resonated, carrying a subtle power that made Madison flinch slightly. A tense silence fell over the backstage area. Guests in the hall glanced around, sensing the sudden shift in energy. The air was thick with anticipation, as if everyone could feel the clash between two forces: Madison's calculated cruelty and Bianca's quiet resilience. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. She had tried to humiliate, to assert dominance, but Bianca's calm response disrupted her plan entirely. The bride's ego flared. She could not let this go unanswered. She opened her mouth to speak, but Derek stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her arm. "Madison," he said firmly, "stop. This isn't the time. Let go." The words, though gentle, struck Madison like a hammer. Her plan had failed, and now her fiancé was subtly siding with Bianca, or at least preventing her from escalating the situation further. The humiliation she had intended had backfired, and she was left with only frustration and disbelief. Bianca, sensing the tension, chose calm over confrontation. She took a small step back, bowed her head slightly, and whispered, "I hope everyone can enjoy the rest of the day in peace." Her words carried grace, humility, and an unspoken challenge. Madison had attempted to manipulate and control, but Bianca had remained untouchable. The guests, now curious about the subtle tension backstage, glanced toward Madison. They noticed the flush in her cheeks, the tightness in her smile, and the way her hands trembled ever so slightly. For the first time, Madison realized that her plan had been witnessed. Not just the song, but the power shift, the confrontation, and the undeniable admiration for Bianca. Derek, still near Madison, whispered quietly, "It's done. You can't change what happened." His words were firm, final, and carried the weight of truth. Madison wanted to argue, to reclaim control, but she couldn't. The moment had passed. Bianca had triumphed, not through confrontation or malice, but through dignity, strength, and grace. Finally, Madison took a deep breath, forcing herself to smile for the remaining guests. But inside, a storm brewed. Her plan had failed publicly. Her attempt at humiliation had flipped into admiration for her target, and her ego had suffered a defeat she could not ignore. The confrontation, subtle as it was, had marked a turning point in the wedding and in her life. Backstage, Bianca adjusted her sheet music one last time, serene and composed. She had faced hostility and manipulation with calm strength, earning the respect of the crowd, Derek, and even some reluctant acknowledgement from Madison herself. The stage had been her battlefield, and she had emerged victorious. The tension lingered, heavy but quiet, as Madison realized that some moments could not be controlled, and some people, like Bianca, could not be humiliated. The confrontation had ended, but the consequences were only beginning. The echoes of Bianca's song still lingered in the grand hall, hanging in the air like a gentle, unshakable presence. Guests whispered among themselves, replaying the unexpected drama that had unfolded. What was meant to be a moment of humiliation had become a testament to strength, courage, and dignity. Bianca's performance had left an impression no one would forget. Madison stood near the entrance, clutching her bouquet tightly, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and disbelief. She had planned everything perfectly, or so she thought. Every detail had been calculated to humiliate Bianca, to assert control, to prove her dominance. And yet, the plan had backfired spectacularly. Every note Bianca sang, every glance she held, had turned admiration toward herself and humiliation toward Madison. Derek, standing beside Madison, looked conflicted. His eyes shifted between the bride and his ex, now radiant with poise and confidence. He had witnessed the transformation firsthand, a woman who had been targeted for humiliation, instead becoming the center of admiration. Derek felt a pang of guilt for not intervening sooner, and a quiet awe for Bianca's strength. The guests, still murmuring and glancing toward Bianca, were buzzing with conversation. "Did you see how strong she was?" one whispered. "And she's pregnant. She carried herself so gracefully." Another nodded. "I've never seen someone turn a moment like that into pure power." Madison overheard the comments, feeling her humiliation deepen. The bride realized, painfully, that the admiration Bianca earned was irreversible. Bianca, meanwhile, quietly gathered her sheet music and adjusted her dress. She had kept her composure throughout the performance, facing the tension with calm and strength. The applause, the whispers, the admiration, it all reminded her that dignity and confidence could not be taken away by anyone's schemes. She had faced an orchestrated attempt at humiliation and emerged stronger, shining with a quiet light that no one could dim. Madison's mind raced. Her plan had failed in every way possible. She had expected pity, embarrassment, perhaps even awkward silence. Instead, she had witnessed triumph, admiration, and respect directed toward the very person she had tried to humiliate. She realized, bitterly, that control could not be forced, and manipulation often turned on the manipulator. Derek finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Madison, I think we need to let this go. You can't change what happened." His words carried authority, and Madison realized he was right. There was no recovering the moment, no undoing Bianca's triumph. The power of dignity and courage was far stronger than any plan she could execute. The hall began to settle into the rest of the wedding. Guests returned to their seats, conversations filled with admiration for Bianca and a subtle awareness of Madison's failed attempt. Bianca moved through the crowd, smiling politely, her calm and composure unchanged. Derek quietly followed, keeping a respectful distance, still processing the events. Madison, feeling a mix of shame and frustration, took a deep breath. She realized that some lessons were inevitable. Plans built on cruelty rarely succeed, and attempting to manipulate others rarely led to satisfaction. The humiliation she had intended had not only failed, but had also highlighted her own flaws and insecurities to everyone present. Bianca's friends approached her softly, congratulating her on her performance and poise. "You were amazing," one whispered. "I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that so gracefully." Bianca smiled, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She had faced a test she never expected, and she had passed with dignity. As the wedding continued, Madison tried to regain composure, but the failure lingered in the air. Every glance from guests seemed to carry subtle judgment, every whisper a reminder of her miscalculation. The bride realized, finally, that power could not be forced, and respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. Derek, still conflicted, pulled Madison aside. "You need to reflect on what just happened," he said softly. "This isn't about Bianca anymore. It's about understanding respect, control, and humility." Madison, silent, felt the weight of his words. For the first time, she understood that her ego had blinded her, and the lesson had come in a public, unforgettable way. Bianca, leaving the stage area, felt a quiet victory. Not one of revenge, not one of malice, but a triumph of strength, dignity, and resilience. She had faced an orchestrated attempt to humiliate her, and instead, she had shown the audience, and Madison, the power of grace under pressure. The wedding moved forward, but the day had been forever marked by the events of Bianca's performance. Guests would remember the pregnant ex who had taken the stage with courage, the bride whose plan had spectacularly failed, and the fiancé caught between two worlds of admiration and regret. And as the sun set over the grand hall, casting warm golden light through the tall windows, Madison finally realized the truth. Some victories cannot be forced, and some people cannot be broken. Bianca had not only survived the plan, but had emerged stronger, leaving a mark on everyone present that no scheme could erase. The aftermath was clear. Bianca had triumphed, Madison had failed, and Derek had learned a lesson he would never forget. The wedding, meant to be a day of celebration, had become a story of power, dignity, and the consequences of cruelty. In the quiet moments that followed, Madison's thoughts returned to Bianca, the song, and the unexpected strength she had witnessed. And somewhere deep inside, she knew, some lessons are learned the hard way, and some victories, true, undeniable, and lasting, belong to those who face challenges with courage and grace.